I've been sitting here for about 20 minutes just staring at the cursor. I'm not a writer, and I'm definitely not someone who posts on forums like this, but I don't really know who else to tell. My friends think I'm being classic Dave, which apparently means I'm overanalyzing things again, and my sister just thinks I have bad neighbor luck. I'm an insurance adjuster. My whole job is about looking at the aftermath of things and figuring out the sequence of events based on cold, hard evidence. I don't do intuition. I don't believe in vibes. But I just moved into a rental across town, and I'm still keeping my shoes by the door in case I need to leave in a hurry. This all started about 8 months ago. I'd been living in a quiet cul-de-sac in a suburb of Indianapolis for about 3 years. It was perfect. The guy to my left was a quiet IT freelancer, and the house to my right had been empty for 6 months after the previous owner passed away. Then, Gary moved in. It was a Saturday, mid-October. The air was that specific kind of crisp where you can smell wood smoke. I was in my driveway trying to patch a small crack in the concrete before the first freeze when a big orange rental truck pulled in next door. Gary hopped out. Fit guy, mid-50s, high-visibility vest, like he worked construction. He was struggling with the ramp. It was jammed, getting visibly frustrated. Not swearing, just strained. So I walked over. "Need a hand with that?" He looked at me, and his face transformed. Frustration vanished, replaced by a huge, toothy smile. "Oh, would you? The mechanism is rusted to hell." Gary, by the way, just moved up from Kentucky. I helped him with the ramp. Then, because I'm a sucker, I helped him move a sofa and some heavy crates of books. 45 minutes, maybe? He was incredibly grateful. Too grateful. He kept calling me his savior, the best welcome wagon a man could ask for. "I owe you big time, Dave. I'm a man who pays his debts. You'll see." I laughed it off. I should have just said no worries and left, but instead I said, "That's what neighbors are for." That was my mistake. I gave him permission. The paybacks started Monday. I work from home. Same routine every day. 6:30 up, coffee, emails until 11, then a walk to the deli. That Monday, when I stepped outside, my porch was spotless. Every leaf gone, glass wiped clean. Gary waved from his yard. "Saw debris blowing your way while I was doing mine. Didn't want it scuffing that nice wood." It was nice. A little intrusive, but nice. By Wednesday, it was my trash cans. I usually bring them in after work. This time, they were already inside my garage. I hadn't even opened it yet. I mentioned it casually. "Thanks, Gary, but I've got it." "Oh, I know you've got it," he laughed. "But I noticed your hinge squeaking. Hit it with WD-40 while I was in there." I don't even use the garage at night. That itchy feeling started. Then the details got specific. At the deli, they were out of sprouts, so I got roast beef instead of turkey. When I got home, Gary was waiting with a paper bag. "They forgot your extra pickles." I stared. "How did you know what I ordered?" "Oh, I was passing by. Saw your car. I know you like the extra crunch." I told myself I must have mentioned it. I spent a lot of time telling myself things like that. The repetition wore me down. Every morning, porch swept. Every Monday, cans moved. Every time I stepped outside, Gary appeared within 90 seconds, morning or midnight. He started referencing my schedule. "Late night on the computer yesterday, huh? Saw your office light on till 2:14 a.m. Then, you usually hit REM at about 3:30. I froze. "How could you know that?" He smiled. "The floorboards, Dave. These houses speak." I went inside and locked the door, sat in the dark, wondering if I was crazy. The ice storm happened in December. Gary knocked. "My heater's acting up. Could you help?" Every instinct said no. Guilt said yes. His house was sterile. 2 chairs, one facing the wall, one facing my window, binoculars on the table, notebook beside them. He stood behind me at the furnace, too close, breathing heavy. I was disappointed you didn't use the pickles. I saw them in your trash. My blood went cold. You went through my trash? Just consolidating. It's about keeping things right. I fixed nothing and left. He handed me a Christmas gift, blackout curtains, exact window dimensions. Note, I'll install them tomorrow at 10 a.m. I didn't answer the door. He knocked for 20 minutes. Polite, steady, tap, tap, tap. Then came the retaliation. Hose tangled across my walkway, dead squirrel on my mat, get well soon card underneath. Then the phone calls, 5-second recordings of my house, garage door, back door, click. I sold the house quietly, moved at 4 a.m. As I locked up, I saw Gary on his porch, holding something yellow, my spare key, the one in the fake rock, like a trophy. 3 months later, in my new place, a package arrived, surge protector. Note, the wiring is dated. I checked the permits. I'll be in the area Thursday. Now, I don't feel settled anymore. I don't know how much distance is enough. Some nights, I listen, not because I hear anything, but because I'm waiting to. I'm posting this anonymously because I still don't know how to explain it in a way that doesn't make me sound either dramatic or paranoid, and I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I mostly want to write it down in one place, because when I try to summarize it out loud, I notice myself skipping details, and the details are kind of the whole problem. I'm in my late 20s. Last year, I moved to a small town for a new job. Nothing exciting, just a better position at a logistics company about 40 minutes outside the nearest city. I'd been living with roommates before that, and the move was supposed to be a reset. Quiet place, cheaper rent, fewer distractions. I found a small duplex in a residential neighborhood, mostly older couples and a few families. Lawns, mailboxes, the kind of place where nothing really happens. My routine was boring in a way I appreciated. Wake up early, drive to work, come home around 6, make something simple for dinner, maybe watch a show or read, bed by 11. On weekends, I'd run errands, do laundry, sometimes drive out to hike if the weather was decent. I didn't know anyone in town yet, and that was fine. I tend to need a lot of time alone, and I was telling myself this was healthy. The neighbor showed up the first evening I moved in. I was carrying a box from my car when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. He was standing a few feet away, smiling, hands in his jacket pockets. Probably mid-50s, clean clothes, neat hair, nothing off about him visually. He introduced himself, said he lived in the other half of the duplex, and immediately offered to help me carry things inside. I remember hesitating because I hadn't asked, and I don't like people touching my stuff, but I said yes because refusing felt rude, and because it seemed normal. He commented on the weather the long drive trucks make on the highway nearby, asked where I was moving from. Basic small talk. He carried 2 boxes, set them down carefully, and told me if I needed anything, tools, extension cords, whatever, to just knock. At the time, I thought, great, friendly neighbor, that's a win. Over the next week or so, he kept finding reasons to talk to me. If I was outside taking trash out, he'd come out too. If I was checking the mail, he'd be at his mailbox. He'd ask how work was going, whether the commute was tiring, whether I was settling in. None of it was inappropriate, it just happened a lot. He also started doing things for me without asking. The first time, he mowed the strip of lawn in front of my side of the duplex while he was doing his own. I thanked him, a little embarrassed, and said he didn't have to do that. He waved it off, said it was no trouble, said he liked keeping things neat. A few days later, my trash bin was pulled back up to the house before I got home from work. Then my porch light bulb, which had been flickering, was replaced. He mentioned it casually, like an afterthought, when we crossed paths. I told myself I was being ungrateful. People complain all the time about unfriendly neighbors, and here I had someone being helpful. So I adjusted. I smiled more, I made conversation, I even brought over a six-pack one evening as a thank you, which in retrospect might have been a mistake. That was the first time I went inside his place. It was tidy, almost aggressively so. No clutter, no personal photos that I noticed, no smell of cooking. He offered me a beer, asked me to sit. We talked about work, about the town, about how quiet things were at night. He laughed and said some people couldn't handle that kind of quiet. He looked at me when he said it, like he was checking something. Nothing overtly strange happened that night. I stayed maybe 20 minutes, but I remember leaving with a slight headache in the sense that I'd talked more than I meant to. He'd asked a lot of questions, and I'd answered them automatically. Where I worked, what time I usually left in the morning, whether I lived alone. Normal questions, I told myself, things you'd ask a neighbor. After that, the favors increased. He shoveled my walkway before I woke up after a snowstorm. He took in a package that arrived while I was at work and let me know about it. I don't remember giving him my number explicitly, but I must have because there it was, a message from him with a smiley face. He also started making jokes that didn't quite land. Comments about how predictable my schedule was, said with a laugh, or how he could tell what kind of day I'd had based on how I shut my car door. I laughed along even though I didn't get the joke. I know how this sounds. I know how it sounds like I'm reading intention into nothing. At the time, that's exactly what I thought I was doing. I told myself I was projecting, that I wasn't used to this level of interaction anymore, that living alone had made me jumpy. The first moment I remember feeling genuinely unsettled was small. I came home one afternoon earlier than usual because a meeting was canceled. As I was unlocking my door, he called my name from his porch and said, "Everything okay? You're usually not back this early." He said it lightly, curious, not accusing. I said yes, meeting got canceled. He nodded, said that was nice, more time to relax. I went inside and stood there for a minute longer than necessary, my keys still in my hand, trying to understand why my chest felt tight. After that, I started noticing how often he was outside when I was. Not always, just often enough that it felt coincidental until it didn't. I'd tell myself he's retired, he has time, or he hears your car, or this is a shared space, of course you'll run into each other. He'd reference things I hadn't mentioned to him directly, a grocery store I'd gone to, a phone call I'd taken on my porch, a headache I'd had the day before. Each time there was a plausible explanation. Maybe I'd said it and forgotten. Maybe he'd overheard. The walls were thin. I started being more careful, closing curtains earlier, taking calls inside, varying my schedule slightly when I could. And that's when the guilt set in, because it felt like I was hiding from someone who hadn't done anything wrong. The uncomfortable interaction happened about 3 months in. He knocked one evening and asked if I could come over for a minute. He said he needed help moving something heavy, just shifting it a few inches. I almost said no. I don't know why. I was tired and I had this irrational resistance to stepping into his place again. But I went because I couldn't articulate a reason not to. The thing he needed help with turned out to be a bookshelf that wasn't particularly heavy. We moved it, and then he didn't immediately open the door for me to leave. He started talking instead, about how lonely the neighborhood could be, about how people didn't look out for each other anymore. He said it was nice to have someone dependable next door. He stood too close, not touching me, just closer than necessary.
I remember the sound of the refrigerator humming behind us and the way the light felt too bright. He asked me if I trusted him. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do and said, of course, why wouldn't I? He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes, which sounds like a cliché, but I don't know how else to describe it. When I got back to my place, my hands were shaking. I sat on the couch for a long time without turning on any lights. After that, I tried to create distance. I was polite, but brief. I stopped accepting favors. I told him I was busy. The response wasn't immediate, which almost made it worse. Things went quiet for a week or two, and I started to think I had overcorrected. Then small things started happening. My trash bin tipped over even though there hadn't been much wind. A note left on my door reminding me of trash day, written in careful block letters. A comment about how I seemed stressed lately. The final straw, if that's the right phrase, was when I came home to find my door unlocked. Nothing was missing, nothing was disturbed that I could see. I stood there, heart pounding, telling myself I must have forgotten to lock it. I called the non-emergency police line anyway. The officer who came out was polite, thorough, and emotionally neutral. He checked the door, took notes, suggested changing the locks if I was concerned. He asked if I had any reason to suspect someone specific. I said no because I didn't have proof, and because saying my neighbor made me uncomfortable felt childish. Nothing came of it, no follow-up, no answers. 2 days later, my neighbor asked me, casually, if everything was okay, because he'd seen a police car outside earlier in the week and wanted to make sure I was safe. I decided to move after that. I told my landlord that I'd found something closer to work. I didn't tell my neighbor until the last week. He looked surprised, then disappointed. Then he said, "I figured you wouldn't stay long." On the morning I left, my car wouldn't start. It turned over fine once I tried again. I know how that sounds. I'm not saying he did anything. I'm saying I sat there longer than I needed to, breathing slowly, feeling like I was being watched. I live somewhere else now, busier, louder, less friendly. I tell myself it's better. I still catch myself checking windows, still hesitate before answering questions, still replay conversations, wondering where I gave something away without realizing it. This still feels ridiculous to type out. I know nothing definitively bad happened. I know I left before anything could be proven.
My name is Laura Bennett, and I've never seen a child like him in my life. And that's not something I say lightly. Because of my profession, I've dealt with children of all ages: sick kids, scared kids, difficult kids, traumatized kids. I've seen a wide range of behaviors, personalities, and coping mechanisms. But I had never encountered anything that felt quite like this. That difference, more than any single incident, is what still stays with me. I'm a nurse. I've worked med-surg and then ER for most of my career. I'm used to stress, to odd behavior, to people acting strangely under pressure. I'm also used to explaining things away: lack of sleep, anxiety, medication side effects, trauma responses. So I want to be clear up front that I'm not someone who jumps to conclusions easily. If anything, I usually err too far in the opposite direction. My husband and I live in Madison, Wisconsin. Not a small town, but not anonymous either. We've been in the same house for almost 8 years now. It's a quiet street, mostly families and older couples. Before all this, our next-door neighbors were a retired couple. They were friendly in that normal, unremarkable way, waving, borrowing tools, chatting about weather. They lived there 4 years before moving closer to their grandkids. Nothing notable.
That's important, I think, because the house itself never felt strange. It was just a house. The new family moved in the spring after the old neighbors left. A man and woman in their late 30s, maybe early 40s, and their son, who I later learned was 8. They introduced themselves a few days after moving in. Polite, quiet, very brief. The husband did most of the talking. The wife smiled, nodded, didn't say much. The boy stood slightly behind them, not hiding exactly, but not engaging either. At the time, I remember thinking he was shy, or maybe just overwhelmed. Kids are like that sometimes. The first thing that struck me as odd, though I didn't think of it that way then, was how often I noticed him outside alone. Not playing, just standing. On their driveway or near the fence between our yards. Not doing anything specific. Just watching. Again, I told myself it was nothing. Some kids don't like sports or toys. Maybe he was waiting for something. Maybe he liked being outdoors quietly. I'd come home from a shift, still half in work mode, and see him there. He'd look at me, not wave, not smile, just look. It made me vaguely uncomfortable, but in the way lots of harmless things do when you're tired. A week or two later, he spoke to me for the first time. I was taking the trash out. He was at the fence, closer than usual. "You work nights," he said. It wasn't a question. I remember pausing, mostly because I was surprised he spoke at all. I said something like, "Sometimes, how'd you know?" He shrugged. "Your car is gone when it's dark." That was fair, embarrassingly logical. I laughed it off, said something about him being observant. He nodded, like that confirmed something, and then asked, "Do you sleep during the day or just not sleep much?" I joked that nurses don't sleep much. He didn't react, just kept looking at me. After a few seconds, he walked away. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't inappropriate, it was just kids asking weird questions. Still, I remember thinking about it later while brushing my teeth, replaying his tone. Not curious, not nosy, just factual.